Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I understand that there's a bill at the desk that is due for...
We are in a quorum call.
I would ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I understand that there is a bill at the desk that is due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S-1582, a bill to provide for the regulation of payment stablecoins and for other purposes.
Mr. President, in order to place the bill on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding.
The objection having been heard, the bill will be placed on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is Small Business Week, a time to celebrate the entrepreneurs and innovators in our communities, the farmers and ranchers, the sons and daughters carrying on the family business. These hardworking Americans are the backbone of our economy and a sign that the American dream is alive and working. Mr. President, small business is a big deal. And the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are working hard to deliver for America's small business owners. One of our top priorities this year is making the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. TCJA did a lot for small businesses. Lower tax rates, the 199A small business deduction, and bonus depreciation and other investment incentives lowered small businesses' tax burden and encouraged them to invest in themselves, hire more workers, and in turn grow our economy. And that's what happened. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, we saw businesses buying new equipment. They hired new workers. Paychecks got bigger. It was good for small business, good for American workers, and it led to a very strong economy before the pandemic. But, Mr. President, many of the law's provisions are expiring at the end of this year. And if we don't extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, small businesses will face a $600 billion tax hike in 2026. Republicans do not intend to let that happen. But we don't just want to extend the TCJA's provisions. We want to give small businesses certainty by making these pro-growth tax policies permanent, because permanence will encourage long-term investment, it will encourage growth, and it will maximize our economy's potential. According to one estimate, making the 199A deduction permanent would lead to 1.2 million more jobs per year, and that number would grow larger as the years go on. And that's just one pro-growth, pro-small business provision in the law. Mr. President, in addition to making the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, President Trump has also prioritized restoring American manufacturing. The tax code is a key part of that. Investment incentives like bonus depreciation help manufacturers purchase the latest technology and grow their workforce with good-paying jobs for the American people. And more manufacturing, more businesses and jobs here in America grows our tax base. And that means more revenue. Revenue that we get the right way, which is with a bigger and stronger economy, not bigger tax bills. Mr. President, we have an opportunity to help turn the page on the Biden economy and set up our country for long-term economic strength. And we can do that by delivering on the President's tax priorities and making his first-term tax success permanent. Mr. President, another one of our small business priorities is regulatory relief. When I meet with South Dakota business owners, I often tell them to let me know how we can help, even if sometimes that means getting out of the way. And often that's what the government needs to do, get out of the way. And that's what we've been trying to do this year. Congress has blocked a number of burdensome Biden-era regulations through the Congressional Review Act. And we have more Congressional Review Act measures planned for this week. For example, we passed resolutions blocking Biden administration rules on commercial refrigerators and freezers and walk-in coolers. These are rules that would have driven up costs and reduced choices for small businesses. One standard had a payback period, if you can get this, of 90 years, meaning a small business would start saving money almost a century after purchasing an appliance. Mr. President, that's absurd. And it's just one example of the regulatory burdens Congress is working to lift off of the backs of small business owners. The Trump administration is also working overtime to rescind a host of bad Biden-era rules that would place heavy burdens on small businesses. Farmers, ranchers, and landowners will be pleased to know that the EPA has initiated a more collaborative process with stakeholders as it considers an alternative to the Biden administration's WOTUS rule, or Water of the United States. And the administration and Congress have been working to repeal anti-energy Biden regulations and unleash American energy dominance to ensure we have an affordable and reliable energy supply for years to come. Mr. President, strong small businesses mean a strong America. I'll always be grateful for the lessons I learned getting my start working in small businesses. During the summers, my parents, who were educators, ran a motel in my hometown of Murdo. And as is common in a lot of small businesses, the whole family helped out. Later on, my first job was as a busboy at the Star Family Restaurant. I later graduated to a cook. I learned a lot there, including what it took to keep the business running day to day and week to week. Mr. President, small business owners work hard in pursuit of their dream. They create opportunity and jobs, and they bear the heavy responsibility that comes with signing the front of a paycheck. I know that small businesses have been facing a number of challenges lately, and my aim is always to do everything I can to help. And I look forward to continuing to work with my Republican colleagues here in the Senate to support and strengthen small businesses. Because when small businesses succeed, Mr. President, we all succeed. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Minority Whip.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are,
I ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
without objection.
Mr. President, I didn't agree with former President George W. Bush on a lot of things, but I have repeatedly given him credit for making the United States the world's leader in stemming the HIV/AIDS epidemic in some of the poorest parts of the world. That was 22 years ago. The program is called the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. PEPFAR and its companion effort, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, dramatically curtailed the AIDS epidemic that was ravaging many parts of the world. PEPFAR alone has saved more than 26 million lives. Thank you, President George W. Bush. Both of these programs provide retroviral drugs for those with AIDS, allowing them to continue to live productive lives and prevent the spread of disease at childbirth. They have been so effective that many have forgotten just how devastating AIDS was in many parts of the world. At one point, killing more than 2 million people every year and leaving 14 million orphans in sub-Saharan Africa. In some countries, life expectancy had dropped to 20 years. A few years ago, we took a look at the nation of Malawi. PEPFAR and Global Fund programs increased the number of Malawians living with AIDS and receiving treatment from 5 to nearly 90%. Thank you, President George W. Bush. These programs are not only the right thing to do, but also highly effective examples of American soft power. And until recently, a stark contrast to what China and the other nations in the world were doing. So imagine my reaction to the Trump administration's decision at the highest level to gut this life-saving bipartisan program under the heartless tutelage of the president's unelected billionaire buddy, Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, never elected to anything, gleefully, senselessly, dancing on stage with a chainsaw so he can cut programs just like President Bush's PEPFAR. It's been estimated by experts that the cutting of USAID could jeopardize the health of more than 20 million people worldwide, including 500,000 children. What a contrast. Republican President George W. Bush will go down in history as a caring man who symbolized what the United States means to the world, a giving, caring people who have helped so many poor people in nations, many of whom we'll never visit, put them in a position where they could survive. The Trump administration says that no programs were actually cut, just paused. The reality is far different. Any of us who've raised a family can remember when that baby needed a bottle and was darn determined to let you know about it, screaming and shouting until you finally plunked that bottle in her mouth and she quieted down. So now the Trump administration says when it comes to feeding programs for babies and infants and children around the world, because they're screaming and they're hungry, just tell them we've decided to pause the program. Pause the program. Parents laugh out loud when you consider that possibility. Just last month, the Trump administration dismissed the few remaining public health officials overseeing programs for pregnant women with HIV in low-income countries. Don't tell me that you've dedicated public service to strengthening families and then take away this basic need so that mothers giving birth to babies don't have to worry about HIV and AIDS. All the experts at the Centers for Disease Control, the State Department, and USAID have been terminated or are waiting for reassignment. That's the Trump record. That's what he'll be remembered for in history if we go along with him. Even with some funding restored, how will the critical work continue without professional staff to carry it out? Like so many White House policies, this is cruelty and madness and certainly not efficiency. In upcoming funding bills and any rescissions effort, it'll be up to Congress, all of us in Congress, not the Democrats alone, we're in the minority, but Democrats and Republicans together to protect and restore these critical life-saving programs that are both the right thing to do and the strategic thing to do. Mr. President, on a separate topic, as I reflect on my time in public service, I've been thinking about the issues that have meant the most during my career. There are a few that stand out, including my steadfast belief that the promise of medical research funding is one of the most important. That conviction led me to join forces more than 10 years ago with a bipartisan group of senators. Myself, Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington, Senator Roy Blunt, then Republican Senator from Missouri, Senator Lamar Alexander, Republican Senator from Tennessee. Our team of 4, Democrats and Republicans, came together and decided to speak up and be committed to increasing federal funding for the National Institutes of Health. The National Institutes of Health is the premier medical research laboratory in the world. And I did my best to make sure with my friends that we fought for 5% increase in growth in medical research each and every year. We did it too. A 60% increase to NIH's budget over the last decade. 60%. Money that is used to research and develop new ways to fight childhood cancer, ALS, Alzheimer's, you name it. Mr. President, if you own a television and you ever turn it on, you can't avoid an ad for a new prescription drug. They're on all the time, with great promise, and many of them are breakthrough drugs. Did you know that over 99% of those drugs, those new breakthrough drugs that you see on television, were developed by America's taxpayers at the National Institutes of Health? Sure, the drug companies sell them and market them, do a good job in that regard. They charge too much in most instances. But having done the basic research at the expense of American taxpayers, those drugs are available in America as they should be. A 60% increase in NIH budget over the past decade resulted in many of those drugs being discovered and being sold to American families and bringing relief to them in ways no one imagined. That progress and the hope it brings to patients and families is why I am absolutely dismayed to see how President Trump has dismantled medical research in America during his first 100 days in office. Was that what we were voting for last November? To cut back on medical research in America? To give up our leadership in the world in developing new cures and medicines for people who are afflicted with disease? I don't think that was a message of the last campaign at all. President Trump has frozen funding to university labs and hospitals across the board. For example, Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, a cancer research powerhouse that earns hundreds of millions of dollars in NIH grants annually, has had its accounts frozen by the NIH for the past 6 weeks. This chart gives you an indication of what this freeze in funding means. Take a look at the numbers for funding for competitive grants in medical research. President Biden, first term President Trump, President Obama, and now down at the bottom, President Trump in his current term. We need people to speak up in Congress, in the Senate, in the House, Democrats and Republicans. Silence is not acceptable. The amount of funding awarded in Trump's first 100 days is dramatically lower than past years, with more than $2 billion in research funding being held up so far this year. $2 billion isn't just lost opportunity, but it discourages researchers from staying on the job, breaks their will to continue to dedicate their lives to finding cures for things that we in America view as dangerous. President Trump has canceled hundreds of NIH-supported grants and clinical trials and placed gag orders on experts, eliminated the programs that attract young people to the field, and fired nearly 2,000 NIH scientists and health professionals. 2,000 researchers. Is one of those researchers working on a cure for a disease that will affect someone in your family? It's quite possible. On Friday, the president released a preview of his budget, which proposes to slash NIH medical research budget nearly in half, wiping out all the gains that we made in the last 10 years. That is heartbreaking. These actions are devastating to medical research across America. We are ceding our competitiveness to China, weakening our scientific expertise that is the envy of the world, and unfortunately, Americans are paying a price. So imagine my surprise by my Republican colleagues and their reaction. What has their reaction been? Silence. Crickets. It is the silence of the lambs. It only took 2 or 3 Republican senators in the past 10 years to join with Democratic senators, including myself, to make a dramatic difference in medical research. It only takes 3 or 4 now to step up and say to the president, we're sorry, this is part of your budget we cannot go along with. We are not going to walk away from medical research. We're going to stand together on a bipartisan basis because it means so much. I came to the floor a few weeks ago to announce that if Republican senators won't stand up for NIH funding in their states, then I would. So today I want to highlight what NIH funding means to one state, Arkansas. Last year, Arkansas received more than $100 million in NIH funding. That supported more than 1,500 jobs and generated nearly $300 million in economic activity. Among the top funded NIH institutions were the University of Arkansas System and Arkansas Children's Hospital in Little Rock. Arkansas children used NIH funding to research why kids in rural small-town areas were experiencing higher rates of pediatric asthma and improving their treatment options. They also used in Arkansas NIH funding to research how to limit the long-term negative impact of chemotherapy for kids with leukemia. Is that important to you? If a member of your family was afflicted by asthma or needed chemotherapy, it would be critical. I won't speak for either senator of Arkansas, but helping pediatric cancer survivors and asthmatic kids in small towns sure seems like something worth fighting for. And I hope that the senators from Arkansas agree with me. This is a serious mistake for President Trump to cut the funding for that kind of research. I look forward to working with those senators if they want a bipartisan effort to restore this medical research in Arkansas. Last week, the Senate Appropriations Committee heard testimony from a mother whose child beat cancer, thanks to NIH-funded clinical trials and treatment. It was a great testimony by this young lady who brought her little girl with her, 5-year-old little girl with her. Here's what she said, and I want to quote her. Cuts to medical research are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are stolen chances, unfinished stories, and futures left unrealized. I plead with my Republican colleagues, break your silence. Let us work together to ensure the chances for medical research are not stolen. These stories should not be left unfinished, and those futures should be realized. Let us protect medical research together. Medical disease doesn't care what your party is. It strikes any and every family in America. Let's stand up for those families and their kids. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
The Democratic Leader.
so just a few moments ago, I joined with some of my Senate Democratic colleagues to stand with a group of small business owners who are living every day with the wreckage of Donald Trump's economic agenda. And let me tell you, these small business owners are not partisans. Some of them support the president. Many of the business owners I've stood with in New York support the president. But right now, all of them are watching their livelihoods go up in smoke. Donald Trump's reckless trade war is economic arson, and it's Main Street that's getting scorched. In a few weeks, Donald Trump's tariff tax has jacked up prices, smashed supply chains, and forced small shops to make impossible choices, raise costs on their lay off workers, or shut their doors for good, which some, unfortunately, are doing. While Trump's billionaire buddies get private meetings to go beg for exemptions, America's small business owners are left out in the cold, forgotten, ignored. They don't have Donald Trump's. My friend, the Republican leader, talk about it being National Business Week, National Small Business Week. Well, I'd say to my Republican colleagues, if you really want it to be National Small Business Week, put our legislation on the floor that exempts small business from the tariffs. That will make small business happy. An idle celebration while they're being smashed with tariffs doesn't make them happy. In rural America, small business is particularly important. They employ more than half of all the workers. These small businesses are the heartbeats of our towns, our neighborhoods, our economy, but the trade war jeopardizes these businesses. Over 80% of business say that thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs, they could be forced to raise prices for consumers, and many say they would lay off employees. Protecting small business has never been a partisan issue. It shouldn't be now. It's a national priority. But what do small businesses hear from Donald Trump? When asked yesterday if he'd consider relief for small businesses, the president waved it off. He said, they're not going to need it. Utterly condescending, utterly dismissive. Not going to need it? Tell that, President Trump, to the small business owner Donald Trump's economic disaster. Today, my friend Senator Markey is introducing the Small Business Liberation Act, which I am proudly co-sponsoring, to exempt small business from Donald Trump's destructive tariffs. And this bill should not be a partisan fight. It should be a common sense. When 72% of small businesses say erratic tariffs are giving them economic whiplash, it's time for the Senate to act. Last week, Senate Republicans had a chance to stop this trade war, but they chose to stand with Trump instead. Well, we're giving Senate Republicans another chance now by working with us to take up the Small Business Liberation Act. Senate Republicans' refusal to stop this trade war makes them just as complicit as Donald Trump. Madam President, small businesses are the backbone of this country. It's time for Senate Republicans to grow a backbone and defend small business from Donald Trump's tariffs. Now, on Trump and the Constitution. Yesterday, Donald Trump was asked the easiest question in the world for a president. He was asked, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States? Donald Trump's answer, I don't know. It was appalling. He doesn't know if he's supposed to uphold the Constitution. He swore an oath to that effect. He might have forgotten that. It's hard to imagine something more un-American than Donald Trump, the sitting president, saying he doesn't know whether he needs to uphold the Constitution. As I mentioned, just over 100 days ago, he raised his right hand, swore in front of the nation to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. But no president has done more to disregard the Constitution and buck the rule of law than Donald Trump. And now he plainly admits it, almost proudly. One of the traits of a dictator, Madam President, one of the traits of a dictator is someone hostile to all forms of guardrails and accountability, who doesn't want to hear any dissent. Well, the Constitution is the ultimate guardrail, and Donald Trump thinks he doesn't need to obey it. Donald Trump is the embodiment of what the founders feared. Someone hostile, a president hostile to the rule of law, scared of debate, scared of opposition. He can't stand the idea of something restraining his power. So instead, he tries to crush anything he views as opposition. That's not strength. That's insecurity, deep insecurity. Donald Trump is putting our Constitution through the shredder, and Senate Republicans are totally silent. They're complicit. They're watching the Constitution be ripped up. They say nothing. Nothing. 10 years ago, Republicans would have been up in arms over the idea of a sitting president saying he doesn't know whether he needs to uphold the Constitution. Even a year ago, Republicans would have been up in arms had President Biden said, I don't know if he should follow the Constitution. So where's the outrage from my Republican colleagues today? This much is clear. You cannot be loyal to both Donald Trump and the Constitution. The two are like oil and water. The American people deserve to know where Republicans stand with the Constitution or with Donald Trump as he rips it to shreds. On Newark Airport. For months, and now especially this week, Americans flying in and out of Newark Airport have experienced increasing delays and disruptions. Airlines are canceling flights. There's a shortage of air traffic controllers. They're relying on 1990s technology in 2025. One Newark air traffic controller even said that flying into Newark is, quote, not safe, unquote. Keeping the flying public safe and our national airspace efficient is the responsibility of Donald Trump's FAA. They're failing spectacularly. So today, I am demanding a full Inspector General Office investigation into what happened at Newark so these problems do not get worse or spread to other airports around the nation. I'm demanding that the OIG investigate, the Office of Inspector General, investigate answers to these questions. 1, why were Potomac TRACON, Philadelphia TRACON, and New York TRACON, the control towers in Washington, Philadelphia, and New York, excluded from the FAA's list of hard-to-staff facilities, even when there was a clear shortage? They gave 13 other facilities bonus pay so they could attract more people. Why not New York, Washington, and Philadelphia, where it's worse? Second, what's the plan to reduce decades-old technology and equipment and infrastructure at airport? Did they ever hear of fiber optics over there at the FAA? And 3, what is the plan to quickly fill? Members have been fired in the FAA. Others have quit out of just disgust. Well, there's a lot of vacancies, especially in the higher positions. We need to fill them. What's the plan? Other airports across the nation could see similar problems like Newark if the FAA does not take this investigation seriously. And finally, on Mr. Bisignano to be head of the beleaguered Social Security Administration. We all know SSA, the Social Security Administration, is in a state of chaos, but instead of advancing someone who will bring order and stability to Social Security, Senate Republicans are backing a slash-and-burn billionaire CEO who will only pour gasoline into the Doge fires. Mr. Bisignano has zero experience in government or with Social Security, but he has plenty of experience in cutting jobs and downsizing. He says of himself, I'm fundamentally a Doge person. That's who they want. Mr. President, American people, Republicans, you want someone who's a Doge person in charge of Social Security? My goodness. I can't think of a worse agency for Mr. Slash-and-Burn Bisignano to lead the Social Security Administration. That's his nickname, Slash and Burn. Every single Senate Republican who votes yes on Mr. Bisignano is voting yes to put Social Security benefits in jeopardy. Voting yes on Bisignano means voting yes on continuing the wave of office closings and mass layoffs. And what they're doing in Social Security, Doge and the Trump people, they're afraid to say they want to kill it, so they try to strangle it. Close offices, longer wait times, phone lines disrupted, emails disrupted. Mr. Bisignano's nomination is another reminder that Donald Trump's chaos is made possible thanks to the complicity of Senate Republicans. They could stop the attacks by Doge if they wanted. They could halt terrible nominees if they wanted. But every Senate Republican, every time, who has a chance to side with the American people, instead sides with Donald Trump. They're doing it again with Mr. Bisignano's resignation. The Senate should reject the nomination of Mr. Slash and Burn, or else the chaos we've seen from DOGE will only get worse. I yield the floor.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I'm pleased to supplement the remarks of our distinguished leader with respect to Social Security. Rhode Island has, I believe, the largest participation per capita of Social Security in the country. Social Security is what brought American seniors out of poverty into a distinguished and fair retirement, and it really matters that we defend it and that Social Security remain unbroken. The threat is pretty clear. The president keeps talking about imaginary fraud. Why would you talk about imaginary fraud in the system unless you have some motive? And it wasn't just him. Elon Musk talked relentlessly about fraud in the Social Security system. The Secretary of Commerce went a mile out of his lane to add a shot at Social Security being riddled with fraud, and then the president went to the other building, the other end of the building there, stood at the rostrum of the House and lied to the American people, flat out lied to the American people about Social Security fraud. He let Elon Musk call it a Ponzi scheme as well. This is a battering ram of misinformation and disinformation, and it doesn't happen without a motive. And the motive here is to degrade public confidence in Social Security. At the same time, you send what I call your little muskrats. You send your muskrats into Social Security to disrupt its operations so that you have the rhetorical attack happening over here, and then you begin to have Social Security fail because you broke it and get what has been referred to as an interruption of benefits. An interruption of benefits. And then you also have your private equity people and your tech bros over there so that when the interruption of benefits happens, they can come in, swoop to the rescue of the problem that the administration caused, and next thing you know, what have you got? Privatized Social Security with private equity guys and tech bros running the show because thousands of the employees who know how to run the Social Security Administration have been forced out. That's the concern, and it's a very real concern. I want to give Mr. Bisognano good marks for saying that he's not going there. He said that he will not privatize the agency, will not. He said that under his leadership, the Social Security Administration will remain a government agency and remain an agency that is run for the benefit of the American people and benefit recipients. Now, the problem is I find nominations statements hard to believe up against the power of that pressure from the White House and from Musk and from the Secretary of Commerce and from whoever else is trying to accomplish the Republican extremist goal for decades of getting rid of Social Security. So I was a no vote in committee. I'm going to be a no vote out here. I hope very much that I'm wrong. But I also hope very much that Secretary Rubio would stand up for Ukraine and that he'd be an anchor as Secretary of State to defend Ukraine against the predatory, brutal, criminal war crimes of Vladimir Putin. But what we've seen instead has been the Putinization of our strategy to Ukraine. And the Secretary of State has been entirely complicit in it from all the signs that I see. So when you have somebody who says one thing, and in the case of Secretary Rubio, who actually lived it, he was actually an ardent advocate for defending Ukraine, and then you get into Trump zone, and suddenly all your principles disappear, all your commitments disappear, everything just becomes, you just become a tool of the Trump political operation. I've seen that too often, so I'm going to vote no. We need, as a Senate, to send a clear message that Social Security is inviolable, that it is a promise amongst us all as Americans to protect our seniors, to protect ourselves when we get to that age, and that no one will be allowed to break it. And one of the things I'm going to ask is to make sure that we go into Social Security's databases and make sure that those muskrats, when they went in there, didn't do any permanent damage, didn't set off mines to go off later, and didn't leave back doors for the information to be exfiltrated out to private sector folks for whom it's as good as gold. I'll say one last thing, and that is that Mr. Bisognano said he would work with me on the benefit cliffs, where you're fine at full benefits, and then one little thing happens, you miss one little mark, and it's a complete crash. There's a better way to deal with it. Benefit cliff smoothing is a technical thing. He promised he would work with me. I intend to hold him to that promise. And my friend, Mr. Cornyn, the senator from Texas, has been patiently waiting, so I will yield the floor now to him.
Madam President.
The senator from Texas.
Madam President, I have one request for committees to meet, for a committee to meet during today's session of the Senate. It's been approved by both the majority and minority leaders.
Without objection, duly noted.
Well, Madam President, it looks like my timing is exquisite because I came down here to talk about something that I think has sort of fallen off the radar screen in here in recent weeks, and that is the work of the Department of Government Efficiency, one of the most important developments that I think we've seen with the advent of President Trump's ascension to the office of president. It's amazing to me to listen to my Democratic colleagues talking like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. I heard the senator from Rhode Island suggest that, and you claim victory. The truth is that Mr. Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency should be applauded for their efforts to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And you would think taxpayers, the same taxpayers our colleagues represent in their states, would applaud this effort. I can't think of a more difficult but important goal than helping the government find efficiencies and reduce spending. Because if we reduce spending, two things happen. Either we've reduced the taxes that are taken